Can you try that again?
All right. I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee on February 12th, 2020 in the Triton High School Library at 7 p.m. This meeting is being audio and video recorded. I'll read aloud the vision statement for the district. We are a community of learners known for our unwavering commitment to meeting the needs of all students. Through the adoption of best practices and our active partnership with families and the wider community who are united in supporting the development of engaged, successful, responsible, resilient learners, students will be well prepared to be ethical, empathetic, and contributing citizens. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. And we will begin our evening with the Student Advisory Report.
With February break right around the corner, it is impossible for us to not look towards the future. While one break may simply just be another average week in the lives of those who walk these walls daily, it holds the power and magic that even a slight amount of anticipation can cause. The topic of what is to come is felt daily and found in many different ways. Internalized questions fill the silence found while doing work, and their very essence floats through the halls while suspended on the cacophony of the sound between bells. With this in mind, many are thinking of what the future holds for them. Seniors have undergone cap and gown fittings, turned in college applications, applied to trade schools, and so much more in the past few months. All of the hard work they've faced is beginning to pay off. I'm sure we've all witnessed the sheer excitement that fills someone's face when they tell you the key idea that is held in the many different phrases such as, I'm in, I got accepted, I'm going to, fill in the blank with any school. It all shares the same emotion. The last 12 years of their lives have gotten them to this one point. But what next? What lies around the corner? And what is to become between then and now? These questions are answered with the thoughts of senior week, proms, and overall adventure. Opposingly, others, and even the same exact people, are beginning to prep for AP tests or MCAS, as is the case for underclassmen, buckling down for what is starting to feel like the home stretch of the year, and keeping in mind that there is still so much more to come right around the corner. The idea of the future sparks the complete opposite in others. They're conceptualizing plans and formulating ideas in which they will leave their mark. This as a whole isn't specific to a particular grade, but instead is sparked by the passion and drive of many throughout Triton. Within Student Council, this has been a prevalent mission divided into passionate groups. Dress Code has reviewed current guidelines, marked areas they wish to edit, and are currently awaiting a meeting with administration. Senior Privileges has spearheaded the goal of a senior sunrise or sunset, among other possible ideas that many rival schools have gifted their older students. This too is awaiting discussion and approval. Curriculum, seeing how ideas for the upcoming academic year have already been presented, is brainstorming additional ideas for the years to come, along with reasons for why they would be valued by the student body. Go Green is focusing on donating water bottle filling stations to the school. Seeing how the estimate for these is fairly high, the first is to be donated by a team effort of the Student Council, the Senior Class, and Environmental Club. Student Council is hoping to donate another one if the sports teams will partner in allocating funds for it. Last year, a large number of students left their mark and begun the tradition of Triton Day of Giving. This year, this event will take place on Saturday, March 7th, and run similarly to last year. The main focus will yet again be painting the school into our school colors. The student body would like to see the projects of the locker rooms and bathrooms undertaken, but sadly they're too big for a group to take at this point. However, a new subgroup on this day will be the Triton Timeline Group. They are working with Mr. Walsh to put the history of the district, and specifically the high school, on a visual timeline in the hall that leads to the drama hall. So it's the hall right up there. And then last but not least, a committed group has been working on the issue of both parking and the price of such. They're actually here to talk to you tonight, so I won't go into too much detail on that. Overall, everyone within this community is looking to the future as a way to both fulfill their goals and leave their mark. Thank you, and please ask any questions you may have.
All right, thank you, Kaylee. Questions from the committee or comments? Dina?
Sorry. I just wanted to point out that in the Triton Voice, they had the very interesting article on the case for senior privileges. Can you tell me more about that, where that is?
So unfortunately, I don't know all of the information that's been presented on that one. I've been fairly busy the last few weeks, but I do know that they are really pushing for a hope to give a right to the older students that a lot of the other schools we've seen in the area have. And they talked to Mr. Kelly, and the belief is right now that instead of being a tradition that is a grade to grade, like every grade will have the same one, I've heard that it's maybe fluctuant, and each grade will be able to pick the issue they're most passionate about that they feel might hold that, and then work with administrations through that. Is that correct? Okay. Honestly,
Great.
That's what I've heard.
Thank you. I'm interested in hearing more about that as that moves forward.
All right. Other questions or comments from the committee? Tina?
I was just going to make a comment. You're a really great writer, and that was very eloquently put, so I just wanted to commend you. I was like hanging on the edge of my seat to hear about like what the students were
Thank you
thinking
so
about
much.
next. So just want to let you know that.
Any other questions or comments? So I agree with Tina, and extra points for using the word cacophony, because that's a good one and hard to use. I remember that coming up multiple times, use it in a sentence, and it's a tough one. One question I do have is, what is senior sunrise or sunset?
So senior sunrise is the idea that if you have a study your first period, you get to come in late, and then sunset is the same but on the tail end of the day.
Okay.
A lot of schools have let their students leave for lunch, but we've kind of figured that that wouldn't be the best idea. But because we have short lunch periods, and then it would just, people wouldn't come back, or we all know how high school works. But we thought that if you have a study first period, get your work done at home. It leaves more room in the study periods for other students that need the help or the quieter environment, and same on the tail end of the day. And it leaves time for different appointments and such as well.
Okay. And I just want to, I saw the email on the day of giving. I know they're looking for community members too. Can you give me the contact? I think it's Stacy Bolio, right?
I think it's Stacy Bolio who's
Okay.
in charge of that one.
So if we have community members that are interested in participating in the Triton Day of Giving, around the table?
We're also looking for people that aren't necessarily going to need to be in faculty meetings on that happens to be that the Friday before it is a half day this year, and we do need community members that are query checked and willing to put their time on that day so we can prep for the full day, because there are students that can't be there on that Saturday but want to help. And I know last year we got a lot done in that Friday before.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Seeing no further questions, thank you, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you, Kaylee.
All right. Next on the agenda is oral communications from the public. So there's a microphone right there. I know we have a number of people who want to speak tonight. I'll just remind you that you can address the committee for up to 3 minutes. The committee can't actually respond, so we can't turn it into a deliberation because it's not on our agenda. That's basically, if there's a topic on our agenda, we can have a discussion with, for instance, we're going to have a discussion with Principal Kelly later. But it's on the agenda. If it's not already on our agenda, we can't have a discussion, but we're happy to, obviously, always happy to hear from you. So, who's first? And if you could state your name, sorry, when you start. There should be a button, and it will turn, the light will turn green.
There's a
Yeah.
yeah, it's on.
Oh, it's on.
Hello? Oh,
Great.
there we go. All right. My name is Danny Groder, and This is Emily Johnson, Jacob Forrest, and Caitlin Keeler. We're from the class of 2021. First off, I just want to say thank you. The fact that we as students are able to go before the school board and talk about issues that affect us, and I mean, with you guys' busy schedule, you guys might not, realize that we have a problem with the parking spot prices or the number of issues that Kaylee has discussed before. That speaks volumes in making Triton a better place. First and foremost, I just want to say owning a car is very expensive. I think I speak for all of us here and everyone who drives a car. Especially for high school, putting down the first couple $1,000s might be painful, but you have a new car and you can drive and see all your friends and stuff like that. But with that comes gas, maintenance, oil changes, just all you just keep throwing money into a hole and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger until the car breaks down and you have to buy a new one. So like, for instance, I think it was like a couple months ago, I got out of work. I was wicked happy because I finally got out of work, and I go to turn my key and it doesn't crank over. And $200 later in a new starter, I have to, it's back on the road. But little stuff like that, especially with older cars, it keeps adding up and keeps adding up, and the expenses keep getting bigger and bigger. And especially for me, I drive a big car, but gas is another huge thing. Weekly, you have to spend $60 for a full tank. At least that's for me. But for basically all of us, we pay for our own gas. I'm lucky to have my parents to, help me out with a little bit of the funding, like insurance. But my experience isn't universal for every single student. So my experience with, my parents helping me out with some of that, it's not true for every single person. And the idea of, having to shovel out another $180 for parking is just another problem, another fee to add on to already my my low financial budget, I guess is what you would call it.
Okay, so like you said, my name is Emily Johnson, and we also wanted to bring this issue to light because we were discussing it with students from like nearby schools, and they were kind of shocked to hear that we have to spend $180 to park. I was talking to my good friend from Newburyport High School, and he doesn't have to pay to park his car, and like I said, he was like kind of flabbergasted at the fact that I had to pay $180. And then I also talked to my friend from Amesbury and this other person from Whittier, and they don't have to pay to park either. And like I said, they were all just taken aback at the price you have to pay when, honestly, at Newburyport, it's just whoever gets there first, you park your car and you don't pay. And the same thing for Amesbury. My friend gets there, she parks the car, and then she goes inside, and it's all she has to worry about. And the $180 really adds on to all the issues Danny talked about, and it just is we're the only school in this district that has to pay that much money or pay it all to park our cars.
I'm Jacob Forrest, and what I also wanted to add was the fact that the budget is also allocating some money for student parking. So we found that if we're paying $180, the point of the budget being allocated for it is also an issue we found. But yeah, what Danny was saying, I mean, I make $180 a week, and I work 8 hours all weekend long, but eats up a lot of my time. And with my AP and honors classes, I'm paying $180 a year, plus the fact that I have to pay for $150 a month for for insurance, plus $50 a week for gas, and it adds up. So we think it would be really good and really appreciative to not have to pay $180 a year of parking.
Okay, so I'm Caitlin Keeler. So we just want to say thank you for listening to us and hearing our ideas. Obviously, this is an issue that a lot of the students here have been thinking about for a while. So we just want to say thank you for listening.
All right, thank you. And I just want to say you're always welcome here. This public comment period at the beginning of any meeting, you're welcome to sit at the meetings. We have email addresses that are actually in the Triton address book. So reach out. I mean, we're always happy to hear from students. I don't know if I can speak for everybody here, but I always wish there was more student voice in what we do. So come on down anytime. And thank you for your time tonight. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So we have another student honor coming up now. The Student of the Month program is something that we started in March of last year. We've had a number of different students here for a wide variety of reasons, all richly deserving of the Student of the Month title. Tonight, we get to honor our youngest Student of the Month yet, and Pine Grove School first grade teacher Lisa Manganello is here to tell us why we are honoring the student. Yeah, you do have to use the mic, sorry.
Hello, everybody. So I nominated Hannah to be Student of the Month because she is a star student. She is only in first grade, but her attitude towards learning is amazing. She actually has taught me a thing or two about the type of attitude I should have in a learning environment. Hannah comes to school each day ready to learn with a smile and the confidence to take on whatever we are doing in that day. What I admire most about her is that even though things may not come easy to her, she never, ever gives up. Right, girl? That's right. Hannah has a wonderful attitude when it comes to being a friend and shows many characteristics of what a good person should look like. She's kind, respectful, helpful, responsible, honest, fair, and funny. Her energy, personality, attitude towards learning, and determination are going to help her go far one day. In fact, if she were to run for president in 2020, I would vote for her. Thank you.
Manganello invited me too. Whatever you want. It's your night.
Why don't you take a family one first?
That's her brother Riley. Yes. All right, and thank you for coming, and thank you to Lisa Manganello and Christine Nealand for coming to represent Pine Grove School and in bestowing that honor upon Hannah. Thank you. All right.
Hannah, if she has anything to say?
Oh, you want to see what Hannah has to say? Hannah, do you want to say anything? No, she says no. That's quite all right. Thank you. All right. Moving on to the consent agenda, I'll read aloud the donations. We are receiving, with appreciation, a monetary donation of $500 from the Triton Education Foundation, received by Sarah Scruton for the purchase of books, a monetary donation of $1,000 from the Salem 5 Bank in Raleigh, Massachusetts, received by Julie Romano, with the money being spent with a focus on financial literacy and Triton's MLK Day of Service efforts, a monetary donation of $135 from Verizon Foundation, received by James Montanari, to be used for students at Salisbury Elementary School at the principal's discretion. A monetary donation in the amount of $500 from the Prince Fund, care of Diane Hawkins Clark, received by James Montanari, to assist the music program at Salisbury Elementary School. A donation of goods with a total value of $6,392 from Seymour Chamovich, received by Patrick Kelly for use in the high school physics department. A monetary donation of $103 from the Pine Grove PTA, received by Christine Nealand for the purchase of classroom supplies from School Specialty. Oh, and that's it. So thank you all for those donations. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
I'll make a motion to approve the.
Sorry,
Sorry.
it's probably because you and I are both
Oh,
at the same time.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? All right, thank you very much. Gotta flip down. Okay, chairperson's remarks. So I just have one quick comment tonight. This was something that actually came up in the last day or so. The superintendent has received an inquiry from the Clark School in Rowley. They are interested in potentially applying to become a 766 school. That will come up on our March agenda, but one of the things that they have offered was the ability to take tours of the school prior to that discussion being had here at a school committee meeting. So if someone wants to take advantage of that, if any of the school committee members want to take advantage of that, if you could please let me know so that we can arrange those in the upcoming weeks so that hopefully those will be completed by our March meeting, so that if you have any questions about the school or what they're intending for their offerings, it'll be, an informed discussion at that meeting.
Can I just add one clarification?
Yes.
So I confirmed with Jeffrey Clark, the headmaster, that their spring recess is the week before our March 11th meeting. So it would either be next week or the following week that we'd be looking to do tours if you wanted to take a tour with kids in the building. So we can certainly coordinate that. He can do multiple tours. He can do 5, 6, 7 tours if need be. Ideally, if you have seen the school, that would make his presentation and our subsequent conversation more informative.
Paul?
Brian, could you spend just a minute and tell us what a 766 school is, please?
So that is an approved Department of Education special education placement. So you hear us talk about Landmark School and Beverly School for the Deaf and the consortiums. So this would be, it's a private school located in Rowley. They're applying to offer an approved Department of Ed special education program. Jeff will certainly be able to go in much more detail exactly how that will work. Obviously, Dave McGee has an opinion on this. In our discussions, we believe it makes sense. It's another option locally. There's certainly some things we would want to see put in place to make sure that we're protected, that it's not something where a parent can just go say, I want my child to attend here, and all of a sudden we're paying the bill. So it doesn't take away a process, but it's a good additional option to have for a student needing a non-typical day placement.
Okay. Does that answer the question? Anyone else have any questions on that before we move on, since I know this was kind of unusual? All right. Moving on to new business. All right. Seeing no one raising new business, we'll move on to an update on the cell phone policy development at the high school with Principal Kelly, please.
So while he's coming up to the table, just to, again, give context, so this, over the course of the last 2.5, well, we haven't done it this year, but the prior 2 years, you reviewed the entire policy manual with MASC. There was not a cell phone policy that we had, or there is not a model that the Department of Ed, that MASC provided. It came about as a discussion that the committee desired to have a cell phone policy. At that point, we were in the transition process of Patrick had been named, but was not yet the principal. So we thought it was important to have the principal at the high school have a say and conduct a process to put some thoughts together about what we believed a policy should look like. So this has been an ongoing discussion. The thinking is that what Patrick gives you tonight is an overview of what the school council and has been happening at the high school. Ultimately, when that work is done, it would come back. This was the request of the policy subcommittee to get the high school's input. I think it goes without saying that the high school has the most vested interest in the cell phone policy. So the thinking would be this was a charge of the policy subcommittee. High school's doing the work, bring it back to the policy subcommittee. The policy subcommittee would decide, like it, don't like it, tweak it. But what Patrick would be producing on behalf of the high school is a high-level policy with adjustments, if there are any, adjustments, edits, deletions to the existing procedure language that exists in the handbook today. So that's the process. Certainly Patrick can answer lots of questions, but just so that you know you're not getting a policy tonight, and that the next step would be when that work is complete, it going back to policy subcommittee. It's all yours.
Thank you for having me tonight. So I'll speak a little bit about the process we've been undergoing, where we are in that process, and some of the general frameworks for the discussions we've been having, as well as the direction that I think we're probably heading in. So over the span of the last several months, our school council has been meeting, and this has been the primary focus of our agenda, things that we've been talking about really, for our November, January, and now February meetings. So we've spent a significant amount of time talking about it both in the meetings and in between. There has been significant discussion about the place of technology in the school setting, specifically around cell phones, but the group wanted to be mindful that we're not limiting this just to cell phones in terms of what we're looking at. More and more now we're seeing various types of devices, and we want to be mindful of that, that if we write a policy and the technology changes within the next year or two, we're then starting from scratch. So thinking about things like smartwatches, the AirPods, all the various types of devices that might be encompassed in this, while at the same time being mindful that as a group, and hopefully, as I spoke about in the budget presentation, one of the things that we'd like to see coming out of the technology committee is the fact that we would like to be moving one-to-one, and we'd like for an increase of devices within the classroom. So kind of wanting to be mindful that as we are thinking about language and drafting language, we're being mindful of the types of devices that are currently out there, the types of devices that might be out there in the future, and also the types of devices we want to be using on a consistent basis for educational purposes. So we've been kind of looking at several different factors and facets of this. The discussion is widely varied, and some of that is widely varied based on teacher, parent, community member, and student perspective. And at times our students are actually more conservative than the adults in the room, which is always interesting to hear. And so from an educational standpoint, I think one of the things that we want to be mindful of as a committee and as a group is that there are times where a cell phone is the appropriate educational tool for what you're looking to do within your classroom setting. And there are times where it's a more appropriate educational tool than a laptop or Chromebook or iPad or what have you. So I can think of a couple of different examples I've seen in physics classes where people are using stop motion video to time speed as something moves down a ramp and time resistance. That's much easier to do with a cell phone than to do with something else. I've seen classes doing audio recordings on it for podcasting, I've seen in music classes, students recording vocals and recording instrumental pieces, and then going back and working in smaller groups, listening to the piece that they just practiced, and then trying to mimic that independently. So there are times and spaces where a cell phone is, or I'm sure we'll find more and more instances of it, a smartwatch or what have you, is the appropriate tool for what is being done in the classroom. And I think we want to be mindful of that and want to provide teachers the discretion to choose when a tool is appropriate and when a tool is not appropriate within the classroom setting. So the general framework of what we've been discussing is that as a student enters into a classroom, the device starts out away. And part of what the group would like to do and what our next steps are going to be is to kind of talk with teachers and to send information out before the end of this week as to what away means. Currently, in I'd say about 2/3 of our classrooms, we have the hanging shoe racks that are on the walls that in just about all of those classrooms, students come in, they take their phone out, they put the phone into the shoe rack, and then they sit down to start class. We're certainly capable of providing those for the teachers that don't currently have them. But whether teachers want that as the first step as a way, or if just in the backpack is what makes sense as a way for them. Either way, we're looking to make sure that we have a consistent approach. So one of the things I recently went to a conference offered by Mass Partnership for Youth around the impact of cell phone and technologies on the brain, and they talked a lot about the need for a consistent approach, certainly with families, but even more so in schools, that if you have some teachers doing one thing and some teachers doing another, that everything kind of breaks down and doesn't work. So we're looking for consistency from our faculty, which is difficult to get a whole faculty believing in the same thing, no matter what that is. But our goal is to have something that our faculty is going to be able to buy into. So the device will start off away, and then when the teacher tells students that it's an appropriate time for that piece of technology to come out within the classroom setting, the student could then go and take it out. This is already what's happening in most of our freshman classes. And as I think about implementation, so we already have a grade level of students that this is happening basically across the board. Our freshman team, I think just about every teacher on the freshman team committed to that this year. They all have the pockets up in their room. They're all using them with their freshman classes on a regular basis. The incoming 8th graders are used to having their cell phones in their lockers. And so the transition there will not be very far at all. And then it's working with our juniors and seniors to kind of move the remainder of the school along. And so when the teacher deems that it's an appropriate time for the device to come out, the device then could come out for educational purposes. Our faculty, from the conversations we had, actually have been more frustrated with the earpods or AirPods than they have been with the cell phones. They think that's actually the bigger issue, that students leave them in, and as they're either walking around the building or even in class, there's a piece of it that seems to be a fashion statement on the part of our students, where they are just constantly left in. For some, it's one; for others, it's both. But the earpods, and I agree, are often the bigger distraction, and those really needing to be away from the start of class. That's not an appropriate fashion statement within a classroom setting, because oftentimes, even if the device is away, those are still playing. And we want our students in class focused on what's happening in the classroom, not on something else. If it's an appropriate time for music to be played for a student, whether they're doing independent work or the teacher has decided that that's an appropriate accommodation at that point in time, then those are conversations teachers should be having with students to help students understand when the appropriate time for usage is and when the appropriate time is not. But we want to make sure that that the default is that they start away and that the teacher is kind of showing students when the appropriate time is. As part of the language that we're drafting, we want to make sure that there's a lens towards the positive impact that digital technology also has on the learning environment, because again, there are tremendous benefits to some of this technology. The cell phones that we have are more powerful than the computers that put the first spaceships on the moon. So we want to recognize that there's a lot that we can do in an educational setting with those, but also that they need to be used appropriately and be used for appropriate purposes. And then we have some language that we've been working with around laptops and tablets being considered appropriate learning tools for students to have accessible, really with a lens to potentially moving forward one-to-one at some point in the future, that we're going to want students having those devices. But again, teachers will have the discretion in the classroom as to what's appropriate usage. So we don't want them just on whatever they would like at any point in time on a laptop or a tablet if we're providing that, but that it's used for educational purposes. And that there will be times as well where the teacher says, you don't need that right now, why don't you close that? We're going to do something where that's not a necessary tool. So from my perspective, there's a big piece in what I think we're going to be recommending that is at the teacher's discretion. Again, devices as we enter the classroom space will be away, and then teachers will kind of let students know when the appropriate time is to take them out and to use them. People have any questions?
All right, I'll open it to questions from the committee. Paul.
So, Mr. Kelly, how are the teachers presently dealing with AirPods?
It's on kind of a case-by-case basis. I would say that my recommendation always is to tell students that that's not appropriate to have on in the classroom. I think if we have universal language around it, they will feel more empowered to make sure that they are responding to it.
The handbook doesn't presently address AirPods.
No, it addresses cell phones and digital devices, our acceptable use policy. I think you could probably say, what they're doing is not fitting our acceptable use policy. But I think I would personally want consistent language, because that, to me, is the more pressing need, actually. So, in going around classrooms, I'm not seeing it always as a significant issue, but to me, there's a significant respect issue if someone's got headphones in when I'm speaking to them. I see that as a bigger point of disrespect if they're leaving headphones in and not taking them out.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. I'm hearing impaired. I don't usually wear my hearing aid, but I should. In putting something in your ear while you're walking into a classroom, I can't fathom how that adds up to learning. Any way, shape, or form.
I would tend to agree, which I think is one of the reasons why our faculty is pretty adamant on wanting that as something that's being addressed as we go through. At least the faculty that's part of school council, which I think is going to be representative of the wider faculty.
So in your school council minutes, it talks about previously collected data regarding cell phone use. What exactly is the data that you're going to drill down on?
That data was from a survey that was conducted last year, is that right? Yeah, part of the technology survey that was conducted last year. And so we were looking at the data that had come out of that survey at one of our prior meetings.
And does that deal with just cell phones or all electronic devices?
It was more widespread than just cell phones, yeah.
Okay. And it talks about determining if more data is needed. That's a step that the council is going to take. Can you just give us some sense of what other data?
So the council was looking to see, really they wanted to get, when they were talking about data, they were looking more for information from the faculty in terms of what their experience was. So I think when they say data, they weren't looking for quantitative data, they were looking more qualitative data from faculty members.
Okay. And you referenced earlier that you had gone to a seminar or...
Yep, so it was the Massachusetts Partnership for Youth hosted a seminar at Newton Wellesley Hospital with there were physicians and experts from some of the various universities in the area that spoke on, one was around managing media with the brain in mind, and the other was social media and optimizing the connection. So were the two big pieces. The managing media with the brain in mind really focused on some of the brain science and the impact that technology was having on all of us, but especially our younger generation.
When do you expect to have language to bring before the Personnel and Negotiations Subcommittee?
My hope is that we'd have...
I'm sorry, the policy.
Yeah, so my hope is that we'd have potential language sometime in the next month or so. We've got a tentative draft of language that group liked, and we were looking for feedback from the wider faculty and potentially from a slightly larger group of students than what we currently have.
One of the things you said I really want to applaud, but the approach of taking it for grades coming in, so like 8th graders are keeping things in their lockers and 9th graders are working with the hanging bag. I really applaud that because, I mean, if you just started teaching these kids, what the rule is, it goes a whole lot easier.
Correct. So, and we wouldn't change what, so I think if we've got our 8th graders coming in would do the same thing that our current 9th graders are doing. I think we'd have everyone moving to that same system. For our 8th graders, just having access to it between classes would feel like a step that they never had prior. So they're more amenable to that certainly than moving our seniors from one extreme to the other.
Just have one more question.
Sure.
Dina, you okay? You look like you're... I'll stop. One more question, I promise, that's it. And so, as an educator and with all of your experience, with the exception of the music class, can you really tell us with a straight face that AirPods and an Apple Watch could really contribute in a classroom? A regular run-of-the-mill math, English,
I don't have an Apple Watch and I have never played with one, so I would be hard pressed to talk specifics about where it would be useful. We do have some students who have identified on either their IEP or 504 that they're able to listen to music at certain points in the day, and so that would be something that would obviously be an appropriate accommodation that's been identified by the team. There are also times in a classroom where teachers will allow for students to listen to music when doing independent work. As a teacher, I often, when I was going to do that, played music for the whole class so that there was still a social aspect of it, and so that they were listening to something that was curated. But other people I know make different decisions than I make, and I wouldn't want to impose my judgment on everyone. But I would tend to say there are times in class where students are doing independent work where listening to music is appropriate. It's just how that gets implemented. I tend to think that the AirPods, though, should be in large part away.
Okay, so I said I'd have no more questions. This last thing is just a statement. But unfortunately, as the position that you hold, you do have to impose your judgment on others from time to time.
I agree. I agree with that, but I think if we want people to actually be invested in change, they have to believe in the change. And so I need people to come along with me. If I'm telling them what to do, they might do it but resent having to do it, and I would much rather them wanting to do it because it's going to create a better learning environment for their students. So while I think this is probably a slower process than some might want, I think the goal is to get everyone to come along with us so that it's something that we can implement and enforce and have as a consistent set of values and expectations for our school. So I get that, and I understand the position I'm in. I just also want to make sure that when we do something and when we put it in place, it's going to be successful.
Thank you.
All right, Paul?
Just to the point of the Apple Watches, just off the top of my head, they gather bio data. So it's something that I could see being used in an anatomy and physiology context to get real-time data off heart rate and blood pressure and things like that. But to the point, rare and not something I'd want my students to have on their wrist just for the 5 minutes that I need it once a month.
I could also see it in a wellness class. Yeah. Same type of thing. If they were tracking their data on a regular basis, that would make sense. I hadn't thought of that as a usage, but certainly in one of our physical education classes, that could be appropriate.
Overall, I'm liking what I'm hearing from you because I think it sounds like you are trying to get the faculty to buy in and make accommodations for when it is necessary for the technology to be out, but trying to build that consistency of no.
Yep.
So, thank you.
We just also say it's helpful to monitor your heart rate during meetings as well. 86, I'm okay right now.
Tina?
I have a very quick and silly question, but my kids are so young, so my first cell phone I got when I was 17. Does everyone in high school and junior high have a cell phone, pretty much?
A large majority, I wouldn't say everyone. I think we're seeing more and more families choosing to wait until their student is in either 7th or 8th grade. And then in the high school, there is still an equity issue where we have some students that do not have it, but I would say the vast majority do.
Dina?
Mr. Lees, thank you for all your questions because you addressed a lot of what I was going to say. The only thing that I would add, and you said it very well, Mr. Kelly, is I think consistency will be key. Mm-hmm. And I do agree that bringing along everybody at the same time, because the last thing we want to do is put in a policy that nobody's going to follow.
Correct.
Because this is going to be a big change for a lot of students unless, like you've proposed, that you start freshman year and it's just the expectation going through high school. So I like Paul said, I like what I'm hearing.
Other questions or comments? So I also applaud the method that you're going through to
Thank you.
kind of put this together. I have two questions. One kind of piggybacks on what Tina said, which is I know that there's obviously a wide variety of phones out there, and they have a wide variety of. We were having a conversation
I
earlier about
heard.
iPhones versus Androids.
I heard in the distance.
And there's obviously, they have different capabilities. Is there an issue or a disparity with use in class based on device types? And is there some kind of, I guess, I don't want to say flatlining, but some way to make sure that we don't have students that are losing out in experience simply because of the model of phone that they either have or are able to afford?
So I think part of that is, to me, goes to our need to provide students with a device. You know, and hopefully we're not too many years away from that being able to be a reality, so that we're saying, you know, this is an educational tool that we're going to use, and you need to have it every day, and we're going to be using it in the classroom for all of the learning that's taking place, and it's going to be consistent across the board for all students, so that teachers, when they're planning, know that whatever they're planning for that day will work on the device that we have identified. The couple of places where it really has the biggest impact, to answer your question, really is around some of our TV media production classes, and Mr. Lathrop really does an amazing job at finding workarounds and finding patches and finding ways to do everything that the students need to do on multiple platforms. So to answer your question, I think some of our teachers are already troubleshooting that, which at times gives them a little bit more work that they've got to complete because they're trying to make sure that all of our students have that same experience. They also can't plan on every student having a device. So if they can't plan on that, then at times students will be paired up with each other, or they'll be working together in small groups, or they'll find workarounds, which I think is where we want to make sure that, you know, hopefully we're moving in a direction where we can be providing that, and we're not looking for workarounds, and we're not looking to patch things together, but we're being, you know, planful from the start as to what we want to do.
And my second question, I don't know who to kind of direct this to, goes to liability, both on our current system or 2/3 of the classrooms you said have the shoe organizers. What happens if a phone goes missing, you know, the thing breaks and it falls through? And also, what happens if a student is asked to use their device during classroom activities and the phone is dropped and it breaks? Is there any liability for the district in either of those situations? Do we know?
So I would say we've had this discussion, so I'm not a fan of a pocket chart with 25 iPhones because they're $1,000 a piece. That said, it's a good solution for what we have right now. My understanding of the way our liability policies work is if the student had her or his phone in her or his hand and it got damaged, that's not our liability. If it was, a teacher said, please place all of your devices in this location, whatever it is, and a phone is damaged or stolen, we would likely be liable for that. The ideal solution, and I've shared this with Patrick, is lockers and backpacks, right? So it's I shouldn't see it, and it also, you know, I'll just leave it at that. That's ideal. As soon as we take possession of it, we incur some liability.
So there's that piece of it, and then I'm going to contradict you, the brain science piece of it is about proximity to your body. So one of the things that they were sharing in the conference, so your attention is most distracted if the phone is out and you can see it and it's face up. Mm-hmm. If it's flipped over, your attention, or you have a slightly greater amount of attention.
Everyone's turning their phone off.
If it's in your pocket, it's a degree less. If it's in a bag, it's a degree less. If it's on the other side of the room, it's a degree less, and it's the least distracting to you if it's outside of the room that you're in. But you know, we've all had the experience. You know, the phone buzzes in the pocket, and all you can think about is, who is that? What is that? I need to look. And our students are struggling with that. And so when it's in the backpack, from an educational standpoint. I've had plenty of students who have been in their backpack needing to get a pencil for a minute and a half. You know, what are you doing in your backpack now? So there's a piece of it that having it on the other side of the room, having it not be something that they have access to me makes educational sense. But I agree that adds a level of liability on our part.
Yeah, I would say I totally agree. That's not contradicting. It's the risk reward at that point.
Yep.
Which I agree with you. If you can, I mean, vibrating is not silent, right? So you hear
Correct.
that, and all of a sudden, you can't think until you know who texted, emailed, called.
I would say if we're hanging them, we should be screwing them into the door as opposed to hanging them with command strips. And nothing against command strips, I'm sure they're wonderful products, but if we can screw them into the doors, then I think you have less likelihood of it falling off.
Fair. And I guess the follow-on question to that is, have we tested this yet? Has anything happened? Has there been an incident yet where? Okay.
Not where devices have been broken.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any further? I'll turn.
The biggest concern I've heard from students with something like that has actually been, well, what if that person is sick and their phone is touching my phone? But just throw another wrench in.
They're in separate pockets.
Next, we have to buy sterile wipes. You have to pick your phone up and wipe your pocket.
If you want to put your phone in a Ziploc baggie before you put it in.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. But they're also in close proximity in the classroom with the child if the child's sick, so.
Going back to the liability piece, can we put language in the policy and in the handbook that we're not liable if something happens to the phone?
No.
Like as soon as.
We can put whatever language we want, but as soon as we take possession of something, that's the delineation, right? So as soon as we, right, if it's outside of the student's person,
Right.
and in the control of the school, we're going to be liable. It doesn't mean we're going to automatically fix every phone that gets broken, but we have a $2,500 deductible. Chances are we're just going to pay
So
to
if
fix
it's
the
in the
phone.
backpack and on them, we're not liable, but if it's in the shoe rack or in their locker, we're liable technically. Because the locker is.
Yeah, a little different. If it got stolen out of the locker versus, right? I mean, it's kind of hard to get
Yeah.
damaged if it's just sitting in the locker, but potentially, yes. Right? I mean, liability is always gray. There's never a perfect line. Yeah.
So if the teacher asked them to line their backpacks up against the wall with their phone in the backpack, would that be the solution?
Trying to think creatively.
I mean, that would,
Within the classroom, you mean?
I would have more high school teachers balking at that than I would students putting their cell phones into the pocket. That would feel,
Yeah.
for high school teachers, they would say that's something that should happen in an elementary school. That shouldn't be happening in a high school.
But the teachers are not going to be the one that's going to foot the bill if the phones fall off the wall and smash 20.
I know, I'm just saying in terms of being able to implement, I will have a much harder time of getting that to be implemented.
Yeah, and I think the likelihood of those charts falling off the wall, they're all like reinforced grommets, I think that's slim and none. My bigger fear is someone walking off with one of them and stealing them, but where they are, I've seen them located in classrooms, it's pretty much, if you're sitting in the classroom, everyone's gonna watch you if you walk off with it, so. So I don't think the pockets are a bad solution. There's just some level of liability. But they've been in play for
For a year.
for year plus in some locations, but more widespread for the year. Yeah.
Maureen?
Just going to ask, are they allowed to have backpacks in the classroom?
Yes.
They are. Okay, that's a change, I think.
They're not in the middle school. At the high school, they do.
Any other questions? Comments? All right, seeing none, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
All right. Moving on to the District Communications Committee notes. So there are two sets of notes in your packet. We talked a bit about these last time, so this is really kind of, I guess, the follow-up to that conversation. I think, the notes are fairly comprehensive. I don't know if anyone has any any questions on them, but I don't want to rehash everything that's already in those notes. All right. Seeing none, regional agreement review update. So I believe I updated you on this last time, but that set of language that you'll see in the January 29th meeting notes has been sent off to DESE. They are running it through legal, actually, along with all the rest of the proposed changes to the agreement, trying to do that simultaneously, hopefully. So that was a little over a week ago, I think, that I had our last conversation with them or discussion with them on that. Have not heard back from them since. I figured I would give them a week, since this is going back and forth between the regional schools group and the legal group, to kind of figure out where they're at with that, whether legal will consider both at the same time, and hopefully get a response on that language. And hopefully the next time we come back here to a school committee meeting, I'll have an update for you on that. Spring 2020 Community Budget Forum updates. So you'll remember that last year we started doing these listening sessions out, and I guess discussion sessions out at the libraries in the 3 towns. We had initially started with daytime meetings, had some feedback that evening meetings would be a preferred option, that there were some people that couldn't make daytime meetings. So thanks to Maureen, she's been wonderful in calling around to all the libraries and getting these set up. There's a set of dates that are in your packet. These would be ideally, if we're getting, feedback from DESE that they're able to do a legal review of everything all together. Potentially the regional agreement could be discussed then, if that would still be on the table for spring town meetings. If not, it would be strictly about the budget. So we're looking at Newbury dates of April 15th in the evening from 6 to 8, April 16th in the morning from 10:30 to 12:30. Rowley would be April 28th from 6 to 8 in the evening, and April 30th in the morning from 10:30 to 12:30, and Salisbury would be April 9th in the evening from 6 to 8, and May 7th in the morning from 10:30 to 12:30. And as you'll remember, it was typically the superintendent and the school business administrator, and then whoever could make it from the school committee. We typically had 1 or 2 school committee members, and I can put up a sign-up sheet so that we make sure that we don't have a quorum there, just like we've done in past as we get closer to these dates. So I'll put this out there in that we have these dates already on library calendars, but does anybody have any, oh my gosh, this date is such and such in my town, no one is ever going to make that date sort of sort of commentary? All right, seeing none, those are all confirmed, and we'll start communicating those, Brian?
I was just going to say, so we'll wait until we have a little more clarity on anticipated timeline in regards to DESE and language about the regional agreement. So this would be, we'd be wanting feedback on a final budget. So once that final budget, my thinking is once that final budget is approved on March 11th, whatever the figure, that would be as part of the letting folks know, letting the community know that that is the final budget. Also make these public, share information. Hopefully by that point in 4 weeks' time, 5 weeks' time, we'll have a sense from DESE in regards to the timing of getting a draft out that we can get comments on. So whether it's a budget or budget and regional agreement. Okay.
All right. School committee goal follow-up is the next one. So I will fully admit I have had the videos on my brain every week for the past, 3 months, and have not yet made it to them. I figure as the chair, I'm going to have to be the one that goes first for those. So I will definitely get to it as we get further on in budget season, but it's just been, I feel like we've been kind of ping-ponging from one thing to another, and just that thought of needing to spend, whatever, a half an hour in quiet trying to figure out how to get one of those out is has been beyond my grasp right now, because I just haven't had that quiet a half an hour. free time to sit down and be able to do that. That said, the other one, which was goal number 2, had to do with being out with the PTAs, TEF, those type of organizations. We had talked about making sure members attended a number of meetings through the year. So just as part of our mid-year follow-up on that, I've attended 2 of the Pine Grove PTA meetings. I unfortunately haven't made them at any of the other schools. I know Salisbury in particular is a really difficult time. That's when I'm usually putting my kids on the bus in Rowley. So that's a difficult one to make. But I wanted to put it out there and see if anyone else has made any meetings for those kind of booster style organizations. No? All right. Seeing none, hopefully we can continue to keep trucking on those. If somebody can make any of those meetings, that would be great. Especially, I think, the new PTSA that's forming at the middle school, high school would be a good one to attend. All right. And we are on to health and wellness education update. I believe this is the assistant superintendent.
Yes.
It is.
So the purpose of this update is to bring you up to speed on some of the new curriculum that is being taught or will be taught in the spring. So as you know, in the past, we had at one point a health curriculum called Growing Healthy. It has since dissolved, and over the last 3 years, we have tried to expand our health curriculum so that we know all of the grades or all the students in the grades are being exposed to the health standards that are put out by the Department of Ed. The good news is that the Department of Ed is updating their health standards. They have not been updated for many, many years. So I would imagine this overhaul is going to be reflective more so of what's happening in our society around social and emotional health, as well as incorporating vaping and other things that are impacting our youth today. So these health standards, like I said, are currently under review and revision, and that they hope that the framework will start to be released for public comment in 2020 of this spring, and hopefully completed by the next summer of 2021. So I would imagine that that is going to involve some shifting of what we are currently implementing within our health framework. And what they hope to gain from this process, they hope that they will be able to achieve, again, making sure that health and wellness is a critical component of a well-rounded education. I think we know now, or we do know, that students' education is more than just numbers on a page or words in a book. It's really about developing that whole child socially and emotionally. It is also going to emphasize skills to enhance one's health, but also to avoid risk. So it's not just about say no to drugs, it's about why to say no to drugs and what are some of the things that you can do to advocate for yourself and for others. They're going to try to integrate topics, which I think is really important. And to me, this seems as though they're taking the same approach with computer literacy skills. At one point when the computer was new and everybody was learning different programming, classes would line up and go to computer class. Very similar was the framework for health. You line up and you go to health class, and that there is still a need for some type of explicit instruction, but they're looking to see, especially within that social and emotional aspect, that it's integrated every day in what the students are doing. So we'll see more integration with the other content areas, which we are already doing right now, so I think it will be a nice transition. And just, again, align it with more current resources and research that is out there and available for educators. As far as updates, what's new, life skills is still being taught in grades 3 through 8. The curriculum includes, and it's a spiral up curriculum, so the students will revisit these topics each year, but at a more advanced level. You have self-esteem, decision-making, smoking and vaping information, advertising, and how they pull students in, which they love that topic. And it's amazing when you start to educate them what is behind an advertisement and what they're trying to sell. Dealing with stress, again, which is really important, and communication skills. We're finding that students are having a really hard time doing face-to-face communication when you take the cell phone away from them. So, and they're not comfortable doing that. So again, really just kind of teaching these basic skills that you would think that they would come to school already and be experienced with, but they need more support in that area. So each grade level usually consists of 8 core lessons, and then teachers have the ability to add, supplement to those lessons and expand upon those as they see fit. Schools are basically responsible for scheduling these lessons during the year, and how they format that varies from school to school. I can say at the elementary schools, for the most part, because of the shrinking of how many classes per grade level, they will have an opportunity where each class will have phys ed twice in, say, a 5-week cycle. So during that time that second class of phys ed meets is when the students would be receiving their health class, because we wanted to make sure that we also provided that time for them to run around and be active, instead of, as they would say, taking away my gym time. So we wanted to be sensitive to that. So that's kind of an update at life skills. We have also expanded life skills into the high school. It's taught through their wellness class, and Donna Anderson is responsible for that. As far as the reproduction and sexuality strands, we started this, was it just last year? Yeah, last year was the first year. So in 7th grade, they have a more extensive wellness class, and with embedded in that, as well as a class in 8th grade, the nurse comes up from Newbury. It's the lead nurse, and she does a couple classes on sex education, and all of the content that is given is aligned with the state standard, so it's absolutely something that we are required to teach. We have all the information available for parents, and there's certainly the opt-out option for parents if they feel that it is in conflict with their personal beliefs or religious reasons, but they can certainly come forward and look at the material, and then we provide alternative activities for that particular class time. I want to say there's only been maybe 2 or 3 people that have taken advantage of that at this point. We've certainly had people come forward and ask, and once they look at the materials and they talk to the health teacher, there's really probably very limited issues beyond that. We are expanding it this year because what we realized when we started to map out the curriculum in more detail, that at 5th grade, the students were receiving information about puberty, but they had not been taught the reproductive parts. So thinking that that might be a really important lesson to go prior to that, they kind of go together. So this year we are adding a class where, again, the nurses will be coming in and providing that particular information. And again, we will communicate out to parents about what the curriculum will look like and who it will be taught by, and give them an opportunity to opt out. I think the comfortable part for that particular topic is that they do in 5th grade, they split the boys from the girls, so it makes it a little less sensitive. So that's a really positive move. And then in 6th grade, we're doing more with, we haven't done anything really on advocacy and just defining sexual orientation and using correct terminology, and that again is part of the standards, and so that will be addressed by some of the guidance counselors at the 6th grade level as well. So I think, you know, it's really age appropriate, and I think they're all really sensitive but yet very important topics to be included in education, and we always provide additional resources for the parents and the students as well if they have additional questions. So that's just kind of an overview of the curriculum. Another piece of that, the strands, has to do with social and emotional. So on the back of this one-page update, I've listed, and the list continues to grow, and I'm just so proud of what all of the schools are doing to really promote and support students' social and emotional health. And you hear it all the time when folks are coming forward and asking for a BCBA or counselors to support these students. But just to speak to the volume of supports that are happening at Tier 1, and Tier 1 means that it's the entire school, it's the whole class who is part of these particular school-wide efforts. And then again, you have other kids who may need something that's more individualized or in small group supports. So you can see the list of some of the things they have. The PBIS is still working. Newberry Elementary and Pine Grove did a lot with the zones of regulation, which has been really a powerful way of having kids to be able to identify what zone that they are in, where you can be in a really, in the red zone where you're angry, or you could be in a nice calm zone, which I think is green. So again, it's really teaching the kids how to self-regulate, how to come in touch with their emotions, and then how to de-escalate. So again, really positive strategies that we're building throughout the school. And last but not least, we have definitely ramped up our community outreach, not only with the work that Julie Romano is doing, but also just through community members and our wellness advisory group. Some of the things that are coming up that we're really excited about is that we have a wellness fair that will take place on March 19th, and that is for 8th grade students, 9th grade students, actually all the middle and high school students. So the fair is primarily focused for students, and it's really to promote wellness for them. And so we have many people coming in who are doing demonstrations around fitness and nutrition and study skills and dental hygiene. And so some people want a lot of tables, but we have to scale back. So we're really excited about that, and I have to say that the outpour of volunteers is just amazing. That will also happen at the same time that we have John Morello, who will be a guest speaker, and his topic is bullying and substance abuse, and I had an opportunity to just view some of his YouTube videos, and they were really powerful and very appropriate for the audience. We will be sharing our auditorium with our friends from Pentucket, who is co-sponsoring this event, which is nice. So whenever we can tap into another or nearby district and share some of the expenses, we definitely welcome those opportunities. And they, in response, have invited us to attend all of their guest speaker events that are happening over in Pentucket, and that has been sent out to the parents and the community as well. We have a call to action meeting coming up on April 9th. If you remember, 2 years ago, we had provided information around students' assets and the idea that as we increase students' assets, we increase their well-being and success later on in life. So all, I would say, faculty and community members and staff have really come together to try to focus in on those assets that were not strong when we took that initial survey. So we're really hoping to see some gains in the areas that we needed to strengthen. And last but not least, last spring, we had a great turnout on a very rainy day where we had plain sight demonstration. I don't know if anybody is familiar with that, but that is where the police officers come and they set up a mock bedroom and they show you all the different places where vaping, drugs, anything else that potentially could be hidden, that as a parent, I certainly was taken back, because I think I'm somewhat knowledgeable, that where they hid different things, and yeah, it was very interesting to watch and hear. So I would recommend anybody who has a young child coming up into the middle school level or maybe upper elementary to just stay aware and on top of what things are doing, because they're changing so rapidly and they're getting smarter and smarter. So so all great things happening, and working hard to really create a well-rounded Triton student. Any questions?
Questions for Kim? Dina? Yeah.
I have to say, Kim, you are doing a fabulous job with the Wellness Advisory Committee. We have been very active.
Yes.
And it's been a big change from writing policy and everything to actually getting involved, and I'm so excited about this fair. I
Yes.
think the kids are really going to like it.
It's fun.
Deb?
I'm not sure how much of this is in your control, but a few years ago, Salisbury Elementary School was the first school to get a therapy dog.
Oh, yes.
And it was wonderful. From everything I saw and heard, it was wonderful. And I see now Newbury and Pine Grove have them and Salisbury doesn't. So I don't know how much effect you have on that, but it would be nice if Salisbury could have one also.
So that was owned by a staff member
I
who's
know.
no longer a staff member.
I know.
But I do know Bear.
Oh,
right?
Bear comes all the time.
Bear and-
That's Sarah Sabona.
Bear Sabona, who is
Has 2
retired.
dogs.
And there's another one.
Yeah, I don't know if they put it in there, but they actually have 2 dogs that come, I think it's twice, at least once a week. And we're having the dogs are going to be here at the wellness fair.
I didn't see it here.
Yes,
that's
so
why.
it might not be in here, but that's Sarah Sabona, who is a retired, yes, 5th grade teacher, thank you. So once the other dog left, and I can't think of his name,
Warren.
he got sick,
Warren.
Warren left, yeah. Beth got her dogs trained, and then now she brings 2 of her dogs in now, I want to say. I know Bear goes in there, but I don't know how else. And the kids love the dogs. And they had them here, too, at the high school for exam week. And again, it's amazing. Well, I love dogs. I'm sure he has dogs on. But they're just great, yeah.
Yeah, so there's no dogs that are in a school full-time.
Yeah.
Like it was
Warren
with
was,
Warren.
yeah.
Tracker at Pine Grove belongs to the assistant principal, so certainly Tracker's there more than any other dogs. The rest of the animals that are generally in for a couple hours a week, but when they are in,
So powerful.
so powerful.
Yep, love the dogs.
Thinking about offering a therapy cat, but I know that probably would
They
be.
do have therapy cat. No, but they do have therapy cats.
No, those cause stress,
No, they have, they do.
just saying. Try not to share my opinion.
They have therapy ponies too.
I was just going to say that, and
Just
therapy
put-
pigs.
I know,
And goats.
yeah, and goats. I'm
That's right, goat
the
yoga.
courtyard, I
right?
keep saying we can just
do
put a
goat
little
yoga all the
farm.
time.
Righto. So any other questions for Kim? Before this devolves into animal love?
I was gonna say, it's not already there.
None? All right, thank you, Kim.
You're welcome.
Monthly report of the superintendent of schools.
So before I go over briefly the items noted, last week I brought to you the information about Crest purchasing the property on 20 Shattuck Road. It is right across the street, as I pulled out and said, Traeger, that's where Linda works. So it is actually the former Verizon call center for 20 years. It's this vacant building. So there were some questions about finances, so we went over in detail the difference. Currently, the cost for facilities for leasing for Crest is at roughly $1.2 million. The cost for a 30-year bond to purchase the building and completely retrofit it will be about $829,000 a year. So for 5 years, if there is no subletting of the existing lease, they would have to close that gap of $800,000. In all likelihood, they will be able to sublet it for at least recoup half the costs. And so there are several things, the way that they'll close those gaps are, they have a, not fully funded, but a very healthy OPEB trust fund, which again, we don't have, but is very good for a collaborative, because if a collaborative, there's a far greater chance of a collaborative going under than a school district. So if that were to be the case, we would incur that liability. So they're able to pay their healthcare retiree out of the trust for the 5 years. There'll be significant, not significant, but several different positions that will yield savings because of the consolidation of the entire Crest operation onto one campus. So between the savings, other kind of skimping, they said committed to everyone there. And the Crest Board is a blend of school committee and superintendents, that absolutely this would not impact rates for the coming 5 years. And then on year 6 and beyond, it would go from a current 1.2 up to roughly 2.1 for up potentially as a worst case scenario for 5 years, and then it goes back to that 829. So for years 6 through 30, the facility costs decrease by $400,000 per year. So it's a 33% savings long-term over the current costs of all their facilities costs. So it is a significant savings, but just wanted to clarify that. The vote was taken, it was approved. So the timing is, need to sell the Broadway property for $3.5 million. That's a down payment on the $20.5 million of the property at Shattuck Road. The bond is for $17 million. Obviously, there's a lot of moving parts, but they believe all of those will align, and they'll open up all CREST programs under one umbrella, one roof, on September 1st. So it's an aggressive timeline, but everyone around the table believed it was the best way forward. So just to make sure you were updated that did occur and give you that additional detail. To go briefly over my report.
Brian, can I ask real quick,
Of
do they
course.
run any summer programs out of there?
Yes.
And what will they do if there's a bridge time when the new facilities aren't available and the old facilities have been sold?
So they would be able to run them out of the existing lease. So there's Broadway, and then there's 1 branch and 9 branch. 1 branch is administrative offices. There's only 1 more year on that lease. 9 branch is a much bigger facility right on 93 there. So they would be able to run everything out of the lease, which just means they wouldn't be able to sublet it until everything's moved in.
Okay.
So that is, as Kim Olivera, the executive director, sat there at the table, that was, the summer program is unequivocally the most stress-inducing thing about this entire change. And I think it will be absolutely chaotic for them, but ultimately it saves money, which saves us money when we're placing students there. So, quick update, Student Opportunity Act plans. I did participate in a webinar. We are required, even though I tried to push and say, well, we're not getting any new money, and the only response was, you still have to do your plans. So it's a very simple 2-page plan because of all the new money that we're getting. One of the 17 approved uses of the new Student Opportunity Act money, providing greater access. It lists preschool, full-day preschool for students, for children grade or age 4 and for age 4. But they clarified that to say that that could also be used for full-day kindergarten. So, because at this point in time, we are proposing funding the first year of a 3-year phase-in, this is a 3-year fiscal 21 to 23 Student Opportunity Act plan. Our thought would be, we codify that. I can tell you, we are checking a box with this plan. I'm going to bring this to you in March. We're already doing everything that it requires of us. It requires student or community engagement and feedback and planning. So just to let you know, it will be a quick 2-page plan. That's what's required for districts that are receiving less than $1.5 million new dollars. And and then those districts receiving 1.5 million and higher have to do the long form, which is still 9 pages. All of us were hoping that the long form was somewhere in the vicinity of 400 pages long. But the plan at this point is to bring that plan to you on March 11th, because that has to be approved by 11:59 p.m. on April 1st. So that will be before your April meeting, and you do need to approve that. To note, Kyle is here. Kyle has arrived. So he is officially the school business administrator. He has, what he has done in a week and a half, he was even here over the weekend, learning about the budget and details and double checking and rethinking and reworking things. He's been a tremendous asset already in the week and a half. So certainly we welcome Kyle and look forward to many years with you in charge of our operations and finances. Circuit breaker reimbursement, just wanted to note in this, again, just so that you're aware, this gets posted on the website under my page, but just the circuit breaker reimbursement, we talked about this. We have not assumed any new money for circuit breaker. We'll talk about that in a second when we talk about the budget. But there was because of that 792 threshold remaining, we did save roughly $65,000, or we'll get additional revenue for the current budget. That is assumed in the budget that we've discussed, all the figures we've discussed to date, and what will be proposed tonight as a tentative. Again, the conversation, I think we've mentioned this, that originally we do have the facilities assessment by Habib and Associates. They did deliver as required by the contract by December 18th. We were thinking through presenting in January, presenting in February, and decided it just doesn't make sense to complicate this. This is not a this year discussion, to complicate this with the budget, so we've pushed that out, and they are now scheduled to be here on April 8th for the school committee meeting. That will give Kyle ample opportunity to study and get fully up to speed, and then we would have Kevin, I'm forgetting Kevin's last name, from Habib and Associates, that would be out and present that directly to you. We can determine at that time whether we want any kind of separate meetings, if we want any community meetings. I don't think this is something we present and then we're ready off to the races. I think this is going to be a lot of discussion about how we move forward. And again, that's the updates for this campus, which is unequivocally district-wide owned. Middle school boys, this happened last year. Basically not enough students to field a tennis squad. So we did complete a waiver. Narissa gets that, I get a copy of that. Narissa gets a copy of that as the chair. This is a process through MIAA, and it is fairly restrictive, requires board votes on behalf of the Cape Ann League, athletic directors and such. So that was approved, and we will hopefully, I think the anticipated number is 3 or 4 students. We're not expecting a boon of students to jump in and play boys tennis, but we do believe there's a handful at the middle school that will help fill out the high school teams. And then there was an article written last week about carbon monoxide detectors in schools. I was getting texts from the reporter for the Daily News. Hey, do we have them in schools? We have them at Pine Grove. We don't have them in other schools. I've always, firmly believed hardwired and monitored are the only devices that really make any sense. That being said, wasn't sure how the story was going to get written until I read the story. And then it was, partnered up with a Christian Wade story out of Boston. And then there was an op-ed in today's paper, and I had clarified on Monday morning that Chris Walsh ran out over the weekend and we purchased plug-in variety, so they're not the battery kind, but the plug-in variety. So we have 4 in all of the schools, in boiler rooms, kitchens, anywhere there is a combustion burner of any kind. We do have a plug-in carbon monoxide detector in all of those locations. Again, it's not the perfect solution. It'll make a lot of noise and it will certainly help. But ultimately, in any project like Pine Grove, even all of the rooftop units have CO sensors right in them, built in the ductwork in the kitchen. So Pine Grove completely up to code as required by the MSBA now. And in any projects in the coming years, we would be obviously adding those. It's a significant cost to add hardwired monitored CO detectors. So we do have those in place, and after talking to Richard Lodge, the editor today, he will be printing a correction tomorrow morning because he was aware of that information, but that was posted actually out of the Greater Lawrence Eagle Tribune office. So that just ran in the local paper, and he didn't catch that to make that correction. So there'll be a correction posted tomorrow. So if there are any other questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Linda?
So I'm seeing a lot of retirements.
A lot more retirements than we were expecting. Folks, there are always folks who right? There are people who say, I'm going to retire next year, I'm going to retire next year. And then there are folks who aren't.
There's the CO thing.
Speaking of.
There's the CO.
Brian's mic's running out.
That was, I know, usually it's mine, I've been talking too much.
But
Yes,
there's some big names there.
some names. I would say absolutely some names we were not expecting. Yes. Yep.
Further comments or questions? All right, seeing none. We're moving on to regular day transportation contract for fiscal year 21 to fiscal year 25.
Yes, so in your packet on page 112, you have annex, 19? We've mentioned this a number of times. Anytime we have to authorize a contract in excess, or we would like to author a contract in excess of 3 years, it does require a school committee vote. We have always done a 5-year contract. It's technically a 3-year contract with 2 option years. It's called a 3+1+1. So the 3 years are locked in. And then the fourth year and fifth year, which would be fiscal '24 and '25, are options that we solely get to decide whether we exercise. So if we believed in fiscal '24 that we could shop out our transportation again and do better, we absolutely have that right. There is that is completely at our discretion. It's never happened. We fully expect that whenever we're bidding, this is going to be the result. So you can see here that the 5-year total for NRT came in at $8,288,700. For Salter Transportation, that same regular day busing was $9,020,072. The second tier, or bid form B, was the cost for all out-of-district. So regular day includes regular morning and afternoon transportation, half-days, kindergarten runs, and late buses are actually included in the regular day transportation. The out-of-district activities is all of the any field trips, if we were going to charter a field trip, or transportation for athletics where they're genuinely leaving town, goes under bid form B. So NRT's total for the 5 years was $428,000. Salter Transportation was a total of $488,250. So you can see at the bottom there, forms A and B, the total cost over 5 years for NRT is $8,716,700. And Salter Transportation, $9,508,322. At $700,000, $800,000 difference, there really isn't much of a discussion to be had in regards to who is going to be awarded the contract. I believe you know, but just so that you're aware, when awarding a contract, we can award it. We can reject a bidder based on whether they were not responsive or responsible. So responsive is how accurate they were in their bidding. Responsible is when we check to see the history and track record of the entity. We've had NRT for 10 years. Are there frustrations? Absolutely. Were there frustrations when we had Salter? Absolutely. As I had mentioned to you, this contract, as much as the rates going up is a tough pill to swallow, this actually increases the rates to be more competitive. It's not fully prevailing wage, but it's basically prevailing wage, which is what all other drivers driving out of the Newbury terminal for Masconomet and Southern New Hampshire are getting paid. So when drivers for Triton are making $5, $6, $7, $8 less per hour, we can't be surprised that we're not able to attract and retain quality drivers. So I'm hopeful that as much as I said, that it's a hard number, hopefully this will help resolve some of the driver shortages that we're experiencing. So my recommendation is that you authorize me to enter into a contract. You're not voting necessarily to the number, but that you're authorizing me to enter into a 5-year agreement with North Reading Transportation for regular education transportation. And again, one more thing to say, this does not include special education transportation. We haven't bid special ed transport since we joined NRT because they brought over the rates. They were managing the collaborative for SEAM, and it was the shared routes. So they've basically kept the same thing going, just billing us out of the Newbury terminal, and have increased van runs very, very, if anything, $1 a day. I mean, it's very minimally. So clearly, they're making their money through the regular day contract, and they've kept the special education rates very, very reasonable. So I will say thank you to them for that.
Can I get a motion to authorize the superintendent of schools to execute a 5-year contract with North Reading Transportation, NRT, for the regular day and after-school transportation of students for fiscal years 2021 through fiscal year 2025? Discussion will come afterward.
So
I'll make
moved.
that motion.
I'll second.
Okay. Now open for discussion.
You mentioned that this total regular busing includes late buses. Can you tell us what you mean by it includes late buses?
So the way that they bid is based on the numbers that we give them. So that's a really obscure statement. So we assume 23 two-tier, which means a bus goes out in the morning, picks up middle school, high schoolers, drops them off, goes back out, does elementary, drops them off, goes home, goes out at 1:30 to do high school, middle, and then elementary. And then, so we currently have 23 two-tier, and we have 1 single tier, which does just elementary. We then say, we estimate so-and-so midday runs for kindergarten, so many late day runs. This bid assumes late runs 3 days a week. It assumes 1 run at kindergarten, midday, every school. This doesn't lock us into the actual use of. If we only need 22 buses next year, we save money. If we need an additional bus, we have to spend more money. This is just a way to compare apples to apples with an estimate of how many runs. Does that make sense? So this isn't, they're not going to necessarily get exactly 9,020,000.
So my question actually is, does this include a bus after the school day is over for after-school activities?
Right, so that's what I'm saying. So
Okay.
it does assume late runs as we used to run them.
For all of the schools?
It does. It assumes that, but it doesn't mean we're going to be able to fund them. So you're not awarding 9,020,000 necessarily. That's the estimate based on the assumptions today. I can tell you for right now in the budget, we have late runs going at the middle school and high school only on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So that's the way it actually plays out. The way we bid the contract is everyone gets the same specs, assume this, assume all these things, and everyone gives us the pricing based on that. And then we adjust based on what we need. So it's assumed at 3 late runs at schools 3 days a week. That's the way the specs are written. But they don't get any more or less money. They can't say, well, the rate goes up if you only do a few. So they're quoting it on a per run cost with a relative assumption, relatively assumed number of runs that they would get as far as and have to staff. Does that make sense? All right.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Fiscal year 2021 tentative budget deliberation and approval.
Okay, so I am going to take this one. I said to Kyle, I'm like, you ready? Just go, just do this. So I figured after 7 days of looking at this budget, that's not really fair to have a full understanding, but he understands these numbers remarkably well. So I might look to him to make any clarifications, but I will take you through this document. I will take it in as much detail as you would like. Again, this document mirrors the discussions we've been having to this point. The discussions we started back on January 14th, right through last week, when you gave guidance about an overall figure. So if you turn to page 1, which is on the back side of the table of contents, this page will look relatively familiar. Just to go through these changes again, this page represents all of the changes from fiscal 20, current year, the adjusted budget that was approved in November. You now see there aren't 2 columns anymore. We're not talking about date, meeting to meeting. This is now a complete change in the tentative budget, changing from last year to this year. Up at the top, the numbers are exactly the same with one addition, line 5. It says prior year non-recurring payroll costs. That is actually in my contract this year. It was a new contract, and there was vacation buyout that was carried into this year, you'll remember. So that doesn't continue. That was a 1-year thing. And then the savings from Kyle's position from Michelle. Rather than burying those savings into the personnel lines, we thought it was appropriate to show you exactly those 2 savings. Everything else, lines 1 through 4, remain exactly the same. All COLAs are assumed in that one line of $529,000. That is not a locked up number. That is again, we're not talking about the exact figure, but that's an assumption that we've held to complete the negotiations with both teachers and IAs. And obviously those decisions would drive any raises for the rest of the district. And then number 1, the steps for all unions, that is a locked figure. So that is the actual cost that we need to contractually provide for all steps for all 5 of our collective bargaining associations. So very typical with previous years, total costs for personnel increases are roughly $1 million. We're at $1,026,000 this year. This year we had a little larger amount to bring our salary reserve back up to 135,000, and we had a little less in the column movement. Last year, that figure was 171,000. So again, teachers and IEAs both have to let us know by December 15th if they anticipate having enough credits, college credits, professional development hours to make lateral movement on the salary scale. So that 38,000 represents everyone. And you remember last meeting, we made a tweak, a few $1,000s based on just the paper shuffle with all of our various transitions in central office. Continue on down, lines 6 is the same from our conversation last week. Liability and workers' compensation is the same. Jump in, Kyle, if I'm messing any of these up. So far, I'm so good. Nice. Unemployment is the same. Retirement and taxes is down by 3,000 and change. 3,250. Dean is doing her homework. I was going to make a comment about you being on the committee forever. So that is down actually, and that's based on Medicaid. So that 168,000 is the actual increase in assessment to Essex County. That is a much larger increase than we've seen in recent years. Again, that's a funding schedule that's guided by PERAC and Essex County Regional Retirement System. That's our contribution matching for any employee who's not a member of the Mass Teachers Association. So if you're a licensed educator or administrator, you're an MTRS. If you're not, you're an Essex County. And so that's the matching, the funding schedule for our match of our membership. And we're roughly 3% of Essex County. Special ed out of district, that dropped last week. We dropped at 60,000. So that number matches. Special ed contracted services is the same. Special ed transport. Choice and charter tuitions is the same. Transportation is the same. IT operations is the same. The 2,500 for the administrative committee supplies. Facility maintenance. Number 19 is the first one we hit, right? Good. We were showing a decrease in order for the athletics funding. The number is right. The actual spending is right, but everything we've done up until this point is showing against an increase over last year. You remember last year we used contracted services. We were hiring a trainer, and then we had a half-time administrative assistant to the AD. We made that a full-time position, and Macy is the half-time assistant and half-time trainer. That money came out of contracted services, so the contracted services line went from 30-some-odd thousand down to 6,000 in the adjusted budget in November. When, with all of the changes and the documents and the transition over past months, that was being compared against the 30,000 and change, not the 6,000. So it looked like a decrease. It wasn't really a decrease. So then again, the number that's being presented is right. It just isn't the savings that it looked like on paper. And I will say this, throughout the whole process, I kept looking and thinking, there's no way we're increasing 25,000 for uniforms and the assumed increase in transportation, and it's coming up 11,000 shy. But we weren't able to put a kind of needle out the exact issue until Kyle went through it. So that number actually shows an increase. Overall, it's a roughly $25,000 or $32,000 increase for athletic. In total? In total. It's for that one line item? Yeah,
32.
It's 32,000, which makes more sense because it was roughly 7,000 and change for transportation and 25 for uniforms. So the rest was a reallocation. So it truly is, the new costs really are at the transportation and the uniform rotation, which we've said all along is new and very needed cost. District substitutes is the same. And then the TRMS funding of Chromebook lease on line 21. As we were going through these changes, and this was money that was carried in the district line last year, and then it shifted to the middle school. So that is it's a must-do. That's continue leases that exist right now in the middle school. So that is a new addition. So lines 6 through 21, a couple of those, including district substitutes and one other, we had listed as new. So I've changed a couple of the labels so that now on lines 22 through 29, it shows things that really are new or really are restorations. So the district substitutes previously had a new tag in front of it. It's new, but it's really a must-do because the reality is we're spending the money every year and figuring out how to spend it. So that's actually not a new spending. That's level services because it's substitute lines that we're actually spending. So again, the number didn't change. It's just how we're codifying it here. So the next four, lines 22 through 25, district history implementation, that's grades 6, 7, and 9. Full day K phase in year 1 at 75,000. Athletic uniform rotation at 25,000, and the reduction of one teacher at SES of 90,700, calling those new. Again, not new to you, but those are new changes for this coming year. 26 through 29, I'm calling them restore. We used to have a full-time ETC in every school. We're restoring one half-time ETC. We cut a special ed teacher at the middle school. I was going back 3-4 years ago. We're restoring that full-time teacher, special ed teacher at the middle school. We're restoring half-time custodians at each of the 3 elementary schools that we cut 2 years ago. I believe that was the fiscal 18 budget. And then there was a time when we didn't charge students to park at our school, so I'm calling that a restore. So again, overall, the total change is roughly 25,000 and change. We were at 2,043,000 and change, and we're at 2,068,000 and change. Any questions about that?
The only thing, going through this, Brian, the only thing that I couldn't find that we had last week was the high school supplies of $1,104. Did that get absorbed into something else?
So there were two.
Is your microphone on?
Thank you. There were 2 line items on the schedule here, one reducing and then one restoring. So since they were netting to 0, it was a full restoration. We removed them from the schedule.
Can you tell me which lines those are, Kyle? Because I couldn't see where it.
So if you
goes
look
in and out.
on your book,
This is from last week.
right.
Okay.
So there you had a deletion. We in Patrick's presentation, he
see
was
what you're
assuming
saying.
1,100 down, and then we said, okay, he was assuming that for other things,
Right.
so we're putting it back.
Gotcha.
So in the process, it went up and came back.
Right.
Here, it's now you're codifying a change in the tentative budget over last year.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Makes sense?
Another question?
No question.
All right.
All right, so I'll keep going. So then on page 2, you have the assessment page that you've been very used to seeing. Again, the relevant information here. We had increased last week, talking about increasing regional transportation to 937,000. Actually, I want to pause there. Let me go back to page 1. Still at the bottom of page 1, I forgot to go over those 3 or those 5 bullets that are still there. These savings are very real potential savings. I will tell you, if we just plug everything into a spreadsheet, the way that the Department of Ed says that they're going to fund circuit breaker transportation reimbursement, we get another $130,000. I am a skeptic at this point in time because I don't believe when I do the math to look at how much is funded and circuit breaker, and Jay Sullivan is saying it's the circuit breaker figure is going to fund all the regular circuit breaker plus the new circuit breaker for transportation. I just don't buy it yet. There's not enough cash there to reimburse every district for circuit breaker and for transportation. So as we go over the next 4 weeks, I'm very hopeful that's a reality and there's some clarity provided to that. That obviously would change the bottom line, that $234,000 that we're showing as a savings for special ed audit district. If we could realize that full $130,000 savings, that would take that savings to $364,000. So, I'm sorry, yeah, $364,000. So, again, I'm hoping we get there in 4 weeks' time. Maybe we assume half of it, but on paper, it would provide us additional relief if the money's really there. And Jay keeps saying, we're going to fully fund regular circuit breaker first, and then any money left over will go towards transportation. So with the regularity, I've heard that mantra. I'm not believing that it's all said and done and we're clean and we're going to get all that money. So we'll wait and see. Special education transportation, I did those out of order. There are actually special ed out-of-district tuitions. We talked about last week, there was a $120,000 tuition. We're hoping that student returns. We're assuming half of that right now. If there are several things, we were just having a discussion with Dave today about some nuances about residencies and things trending our way. So hopefully by the time we get to March 11th, we can make a little more aggressive assumption. Right now, we're planning for every possibility that could happen, and it's looking more like some of those things may not happen, which is a slight difference in our trend from recent years. Yeah, I started with number 3 there. So the special education transportation, that would be just straight costs, not a circuit breaker reimbursement, but just straight costs. There could be some wiggle room. It depends on those other the tuitions. Additional charter school funding. Right now, the way it's funded in the budget, we're getting a decrease in our funding from this year into next year. There could be they have some special special charter school funding that they did in fiscal 20. I don't think there's any chance that that's going to change before March 11th. So that would be something that would filter back into the excess and deficiency and be recertified when we certify that to the towns next winter, fall. And then additional regional transportation reimbursement. We're currently assuming 80.5%. The assumption for fiscal 20 is 85%. So at roughly 1.2 million in costs that are reimbursable, 5% is a decent chunk of change. So another 50,000 there. So all of those we will have to continue to watch. And when we come back to you on March 11th with a final budget, the assumption is the high water mark wouldn't be, we're at the high water mark for what we're talking about proposing for spending, and any of those would continue to provide relief to the overall bottom line assessed to the towns. So now, over to page 2, the assumption for the revenues with regional transportation, a little less interest revenue, Chapter 70 based on what is proposed in the governor's budget, and then 150,000 less in Medicaid. Dave has done quite a bit of work now trying to understand Medicaid reimbursement, and I think we'll have a plan in place as we move forward so that we're still struggling this year with all the new regulations. The basic change is that Medicaid is providing reimbursement for medical costs for students who can't afford them. So there's economically disadvantaged. There's a reimbursement that goes towards the medical costs. As a school, we're not a medical institution, but we can provide those services. OT, PT, speech. They're now expanding that to adjustment counseling, ASD program. So they're increasing the breadth of services we can get reimbursed for, but then they've taken the paperwork and just tripled it. So they're not, rather than saying, okay, we're an educational institution, there's an evaluation, there's an IEP, there's all of this, they're treating it more like a medical, there's a diagnosis, there's a treatment plan. And so rather than saying, okay, we'll do this instead, it's now the requirement is you have to do both. So the amount of paperwork, there are many districts who have just said, you know what, it's not worth the money. So we're still trying to assess. We believe it can be worth the money, even if it meant, I said this to Dave the other day, even if it meant for new money coming in, we have to hire an additional person to do all the billing. Still, we could come out way ahead if that works out for the numbers. So that's still a work in progress. So we're assuming a 50,000 less in our Medicaid reimbursements for next year. Hopefully, we'll be pleasantly surprised in the way that moves forward. So ultimately, that yields a assessment to Newbury of 9.9 million, to Rowley of just over 11 million, and to Salisbury of 13.5 million. So that's an increase of 523,000 to Newbury, 489,000 to Rowley, and 940,000 to Salisbury. Again, this is the second year that the formula is dictating a much larger increase to Salisbury than their percentage would otherwise dictate. So they're approaching 40% of the district. They're paying for close to 50% of the total assessment. Capital, again, is going down 68,000. Over the page is the calculation of that. Any questions on that?
Paul?
just want to back up if that's okay. And I just have a question, Brian, on the line 20 district substitutes.
Yep.
It says 25,000. It says based on historical spending.
Yep.
And so, can you go to page 20 of the document? And I just want to drill down for a moment on the 23-25 line. It says teaching services substitutes.
Yep.
Does that comprise of the 5
Yes.
different schools?
Yes.
Is there anything else that comes into that line item for the district-wide, on page 20?
No, so that historically, probably, it was during Michelle's tenure, we moved that to a district-wide line. Historically, it was funded in each school, and there are such fluctuations within each year, because that is all substitutes, whether that's I'm out sick today, I'm calling in a sub, or I'm going out on a medical leave for 10 weeks and I'm calling in a long-term, a short-term teacher. All of those substitutes, unless if someone was going to go off the payroll, right? So if someone took a year leave of absence and was unpaid and we hired a teacher, that would be charged to the salary line, the 2305. If we're still paying the regular teacher out of the 2305 salary line that's in each school, then the person coming in to replace her or him is going to be charged against this substitute line. So that 275, you can see historically in fiscal 17, that was a tough year, $392,000. That was a big year for leaves, clearly. That wasn't just daily substitutes.
So I guess that's really my question, the 392 figure, because that's really the only thing we can look at historically, because you don't have 18 for all the different schools, and you don't have 19 for all the different schools. There's just that 17.
Yep.
And if you add up the 5 different schools, then it comes up to $216,000, which is $176,000 less than the 392. So you're saying that a person being out long-term would have been lumped into that 392 in fiscal 17?
Yes to the last question, but say the first part of that again, the math you were doing?
Yeah, so the math I did for fiscal year 17, the 5 different schools comes out to $216,000, according to the information provided in this document.
So are you looking at
If you add up the actual
Gotcha, okay.
substitutes
Gotcha.
for the 5 different schools, it comes up to 216.
Yes.
And not 392, but you're saying that back then, it included like short-term disability, or?
I would have to go back and unpack that 392, but if I remember correctly, there was, I want to say we had in multiple fields, not just in teaching and custodians, we had multiple people out for extended periods of time. Yes.
So it wasn't just substitutes then?
No, it gets categorized per DESI's codes as substitute costs.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be, if we were paying, we don't cover short-term disability, but if we were paying substitutes, regardless of what we're paying them, it would get coded as a 2325.
And so I just went back historically, Brian, back in fiscal year 15.
Yep.
And that 2325 figure was $26,000 then. And then in the next year, in fiscal year 16, it was $71,000.
Yep.
And then it went up to the $392,000. And do you think that's attributable to certain teachers that went out, not substitutes, but for long-term illness?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are one-off, because you can, if you look at now the fiscal 18, fiscal 19 actuals, you can see that those are no longer in the schools at all. And you can see it was 302 and then 299. And we currently have 275 budgeted. The 300,000 district-wide is much more typical.
Brian, what's the difference between an actual and a final adjusted?
So the actual, the 17, 18, 19 are actual audited figures. That is actual, those are years that are done and cash that went out the door. Fiscal 20 is our final adjusted. That's our current budget.
But like, I'm looking at the 18, 19, and it says for 15, 16, and 17, actual. And then fiscal year 18, it says final adjusted. What's the difference between final adjusted and actual?
So a final adjusted, if you look at fiscal 20, that's a projection for the current year we're in. So I can't give you a final for fiscal 20 because we're living it. And then fiscal 21 is what we're saying is going to happen next year. Fiscal 19 is last year, I know what it was. Fiscal 18, 17, I know what it was. So if it says actual, that's an actual end of year, everything paid out, exactly what was spent.
Okay, thank you.
An adjusted is a budget, it's assumed.
I think it's worth saying too that when we review the finances in finance subcommittee on the general fund ledger, we're always looking at the roll-up number. We've never looked at it on the school basis, and it's always had overruns in it as long as I've been on the committee. It's just, you know, it's a hard number to forecast, and we've always underestimated what it would be. And a lot of those years we've looked at upping it, and we've had a bad budget year, and it's easier to say, well, hopefully this year will be 25,000 less, and then we scramble for that money at the end.
And we've historically been going to excess and deficiency. And it doesn't matter whether we're voting that now, right? We don't have that as a revenue now, but if we're doing it in April, May, June, as far as our bond rating, it's the same thing. And, you know, Kyle and I were having a discussion. We could talk about stabilizations, we could talk about OPEBs, we can talk about E&D. OPEB, absolutely need to look to that for the future. Small increments. I mean, when you're talking about 10,000 on a $68 million liability, starting to change practice so that we're actually doing things that are going to restore our excess and efficiency or move towards a stabilization. I don't think this year is the time to talk about a stabilization, but funding the budget correctly so that we know we're not going to have to dip into E&D come April. It's the only prudent thing to do. And this is about the town's fiscal health as well, because if we're talking about something on this campus 5 years, how many years down the road, we've got to have a better bond rating than we do now, where the towns are going to pay more because it's their assessment. So all the taxpayers benefit from the financial health of the district. Yeah.
Any further questions for Brian? What he's presented? We good? Okay. I believe Deb has the, oh, yes.
Oh, so you ready to go? Yeah, I was going to say, so then the rest of the pages, I won't go through them. The rest of the pages, just so for people watching, you've got grants and revolvings back there. That's information only. That's the current year. There's no science there other than this is what currently is assumed. You don't vote on grants and revolvings, but medical's updated. You've got the staff roster with new folks tucked in there. And you've got a note at the bottom of every school and then at the bottom of the district-wide, basically outlining the things. Page one, right? Page one is now spread out. The only thing I will call your attention to is on district-wide, page 21. You'll see 5,500 other fixed charges. Rather than embedding all of those things in the budget, that would eventually get adjusted in that adjusted fall budget. But rather than showing those all over the place, I think it makes sense to show them here because they're significant increases. So you can point specifically to these things. The COLA, the steps, the column movement, the salary reserve, full day K, and elimination of parking fees, all of those are sitting there. Obviously, the new middle school teacher for special ed is in the middle school, but things that don't have a home yet necessarily, because the increased parking fees, that cost will actually be added to the snow removal line, because that's what we use parking fees for. So rather than embedding it and not showing it, it shows you everything. So you can find everything on page one, you can basically find in a note in the bottom of all the other pages.
Go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the fiscal year 2021 tentative budget of $46,112,840, including both operating and capital debt costs, with a total operating expenditure of $44,545,246 and capital expenditure of $1,567,594, resulting in combined assessments to the town of Newbury of $10,016,439, the town of Rowley of $11,155,178, and the town of Salisbury of $13,734,832, with the remaining balance of $11,206,390 being funded by other state and local revenues.
I'll second.
Can I just state? So those numbers you just heard Deb read, the assessments to towns, you're not going to find in this document. So you remember when we talked about, you'll find the combination. Remember when we talked about with the regional agreement? You're voting. We always take an operation vote and a capital vote. By statute, you're supposed to vote one number and then a total assessment to the towns. So in subsequent budgets, we're going to find a place to put that without tucking it in and cramming it in. We're going to find a place to put that. But the numbers that Deb just read are the total general operating, the total capital debt, and then that on the bottom blue bar there at the top, the $46,112,000, and then it's the combination of the operating, the yellow plus the green for each town. Just to clarify in case anyone was trying to follow along.
Discussion? Sorry, go for it.
Sorry, I just looking at my notes, there were a couple other things. Noting in the superintendent's report, the Pine Grove School Council had some concerns about the grade 6 teacher, looking at those class sizes. Is that likely to change if we have a windfall of cash? Is that something that will be on our high priority list to put another teacher in there? Those class sizes are higher than the other 2 elementary schools?
I would tell you that my priority, is it a priority? Absolutely. So I'll tell you the things we've talked about. Grade 6 at Pine Grove, we've talked extensively about math specialists. Something else we talked extensively about. I mean, the BCBA, and so there's definitely services. Pine Grove has identified the BCBA as a higher priority than the 6th grade teacher.
Okay.
I would say this to you, the figure that has been proposed as a tentative budget is a massive number. So I think if there's any savings, my suggestion is that we bring down the total assessment to the towns with the additions, restorations that we've outlined here. That doesn't mean that can't change. But that's my thinking now, is that we'd be working down from that total figure. That doesn't mean we can't swap. You know, as we go through the continuing discussions, the budget hearing, if there are, you know, the will of the committee, if there's discussions about something we want to change, we can certainly have the discussion. I just don't see the windfall happening. And if there was new cash, the focus would be on mental health of this, the mental health positions, we'll call them, whether it's a social worker, adjustment counselor, or BCBA. That's been the priority over the classroom teacher.
Well, I appreciate that clarification. I just want to make sure that
absolutely.
Anybody who might be listening from Pine Grove knows that we are looking at that.
Absolutely.
It is on our radar, but
absolutely.
priorities.
I was going to say, too, I hear about that daily. So I'm reasonably sure that the committee will be hearing about that, because the follow-up question to every, is there an update, is how do I get in touch with the committee and make my voice known, and is it too late? And I always say, no, it's not too late, and here's your methods, and, you know, just know that, you know, the tentative gets voted, that kind of sets the line, and then, you know, changes can be made from there. But that's kind of where you know what's coming, or have a good idea of what's potentially included. Did you have anything else, or was just that one? Okay. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor? All right, unanimous?
Thank you.
Yes, so still a long way to go on the budget, but that gets us to the tentative high water mark. 2020-2021 school year calendar approval?
Doesn't even make sense when you say it out loud.
No.
So, you know, this year is a leap year, which means next year is a very late Labor Day. Labor Day next year is on the 7th of September. If we stay with our traditional start 1 week before Labor Day with all of our professional development and items, that would be a start of September 8th. That is very late. That pushes us way into into June as just the regular end. So what you have before you is a very typical calendar, and I will outline what is being suggested as far as changes. In August, proposing that the new teacher orientation not happen within that first week. There's additional discussions ongoing with the TRTA that is still in executive session and negotiations in regards to what that might look like. But we would pull new teacher orientation out of that week, which frees up a day. So what we're proposing is, you can see Monday, August 31st would be the day everyone comes back. Convocation, the whole district gathers in the auditorium. Folks go back to the schools to have opening meetings. We would then have professional development on September 1st. We would then have the first day of school on September 2nd. Students would come September 2nd and 3rd. We would be closed Friday, as we always are. We'd be closed Monday, Labor Day, and then return on September 8th, and that would then be the third day of school. So that's an atypical beginning of the year. Certainly, I want to say 2011 was the last time this happened. So that's happened in the past. There were times when we always went before Labor Day, but historically, it seems to be, in talking with parents, most teachers say, yes, just give us through Labor Day, please. It seems like June is now cool because it's the new spring, and it's still, just the seasons are changing. For whatever you believe scientifically, the seasons are changing. So the general consensus is, parents have said, we're happier to go later in June. Teachers have said, we're happy to go later in June if you just give us till Labor Day. So I think that this will be very well received by families. It follows a very typical pattern. I think the majority of districts will be going back before Labor Day next year, sometime in that week, exactly when it depends. The other things noted here are professional development days, the half days, other days off. So the questions to be answered, we've had some ongoing discussions about rethinking professional development. We like the concept of, there are districts who are going an early release every other week rather than half days once a month. So rather than a half day literally releasing before lunchtime, a more frequent 90-minute release that gives more consistent time for teachers to work together, collaborate. I don't think we're there. We're definitely not there as far as a proposal and making that happen. But the Professional Development Committee has had an extensive discussion and would like to move the half days that we currently have. There's 8 of them. They fall basically in the same time frame as they are this current year, but rather than happening on Fridays, having them on Wednesdays instead. I know that is, for families, it's a lot easier to have a half day on a Friday. So this is a discussion, and we don't even need to poll parents. I can tell you they would rather have Fridays. This is about quality PD. So this comes down to, everyone loves to take Friday afternoons off, right? So when we have a Friday afternoon PD, it's a much easier time to stack your personal days. I think pulling it back into the week discourages that, and it also, you're only halfway through the week, so you're only halfway tapped out. So if we're spending a half day together with professional development, everyone's far more engaged and energetic on a Wednesday afternoon than folks are on a Friday afternoon. I don't know. Friday afternoons are certainly not my best time. So if we're saying that these half days are really important times, and we're releasing kids and dedicating time because it's important for teachers and educators to be spending time working together and collaborating and learning new methods and techniques, then we should be putting them in the place that's going to be the most beneficial for the quality of the PD. So that's one change. That's the only PD change, right?
Full day.
Oh, that's right. So the other thing, in order for the September to happen, that and get 2 days in, we can only do one PD day before Labor Day. Because if we were to pull the new teacher orientation into August, we would have 2 convocation and then PD day 1 on the 1st. If we did PD day 2, as we always have on the Wednesday, we would only have 1 day available to bring students in. And I certainly believe, I wouldn't recommend to you bringing in students for 1 day. I think that would easily be a wasted day. 2 days, we can come in, start establishing routines, get things out of the way. At the high school, it's about syllabus. It's about, at the elementary, it's about meeting and some setting some routines, and then coming back on the 8th ready to roll. So that means we need to push one PD day out into the school year. Ideally, we would have that in the winter because it allows some flexibility. If we're having a tough snow day, we can move that around and could make that a school day. But you can talk extensively about using the election day. You want to talk a little bit about that? Well, not extensively.
Because of the time, but just because.
It's a Wednesday afternoon, perfect time for PD.
No, so many surrounding districts have that election day off, and we're finding we're missing out on many opportunities for our teachers, our specialists to connect with other professionals in those particular districts that do have that election day release. Many of the schools are actually election or voting sites, so we would love to tap into that resource and that networking for our teachers as well. And we also felt like where it fell in November, any of the new programs or resources that we're launching in early September, it really gives us a great opportunity to check in with teachers to find how things are going and what additional supports they need instead of waiting till after Christmas or before Christmas. So it just seemed like a really great place for us for many reasons. 2 of those I just mentioned.
Yeah, so the time of year works. The day is specifically driven by the fact that we can collaborate, and specifically, it's good to collaborate with any discipline, but those disciplines where there's only a handful of OTs, PTs, those folks, to be able to collaborate and have kind of regional professional development is powerful. So, that's a change, moving that PD day out into the school year, moving the half days from Friday afternoons to Wednesday afternoons. Other than that, the only other thing I would note, Christmas is on a Friday, so this is proposing coming Monday through Wednesday. I've had lots of people ask about Good Friday. So it was during Christopher Farmer's tenure. Prior to Christopher, we had school off completely. During his time, couldn't tell you exactly when, it moved to a half day. I've heard many people say to me, man, I'd love to trade that half day. Let's come a full day and have the day before, Christmas Eve, right? Christmas Eve is the new holiday. So there's a whole lot more families and people traveling around the Christmas holiday than around Good Friday. So if we were to do the half day, trading a half day on Good Friday, April 2nd, for Wednesday, December 23rd. That would be a change. I'm proposing it here as we have now, but that's certainly something that I would say, certainly something to consider. We have to do a little more calculating on hours and time on learning. The 990 requirement at the middle school, high school was fairly tight with the schedule. So we can't we can add a half day and have it count towards our a total 180. But with the hours, the 990 hours required, we're pretty tight. So just throwing an extra half day in there is a little bit dangerous without doing some serious reworking of things. But just as an option, that's something I've heard from teachers and parents alike, that they would much rather have a half day up against Christmas break, the winter break, than against up on Good Friday. So other than that, the days off, the conferences, are fairly typical other than those items. And that gives us, you remember you have to post a schedule with 180 and 185. That would be without snow days, the 180th day would be the 16th of June. And with 5 snow days, it would be June 23rd, which is significantly later than this year.
Question, Brian? Paul?
Speaking as a family who sometimes travels 380 miles for the holidays, I would love to have a half day on the 23rd instead of a full day, and would gladly trade that for the Good Friday half day, just in terms of reduced stress around holiday times.
I would agree with Paul on the 23rd, half day in December, but I also wanted to just ask, assuming that if this goes through where the PD days will be moved to Wednesdays, that you'll send out some sort of notification to families, sort of eloquently stating what you said before, how the value of having it on a Wednesday, just because I think it's been done so long on Fridays. Parents will need to plan childcare and so forth.
In the kids club and the kids club and after-school programs would still be available for as an option for parents who need childcare.
Karen?
So just to go off, like Paul commented for his family, speaking as a mother that travels for work, it's a lot easier to get a Monday or a Friday where I can say to them that I'm taking the school half days off than it is to get a Wednesday. If I have to travel for the week, Wednesday is really not a day that they're going to let me take off.
All right. So I guess the one I don't love is the election day one. I fully understand why, but I keep looking at that Tuesday and thinking, gosh, you've got a Tuesday off that week, you've got Veterans Day off the next week, you've got a full week, and then you're into Thanksgiving week. And that's a really tough schedule. So, no, I understand where it's coming from, but that's one that I'm personally just looking at and wondering how much of learning continuity are you losing in November with all those. So traditionally what we've done is we've approved this as a first reading, and then I'm sure we will get questions, comments, and feedback from people in our community. And, you know, at some point, is it next month that we would have to, March, we would have to do?
It's either been February or March, yeah.
Okay.
Pending.
So, I mean, I guess my recommendation would be funnel any feedback you're getting into Brian in between, since we have a pretty tight schedule with getting a second reading done. Because I think if there's going to be a massive backlash against one of these changes, you know, we need to get the communication out there on the district side. We need to make sure that people are actually reading that communication on our parts, and that people are aware, and then get that feedback back as soon as possible, so that if there needs to be any change in between the first and second reading, that we that change gets made effective.
So I'd say, do you?
I was almost to a vote.
No, I was going to say, do you want formal feedback? I can write the feedback for you, right? So this is going to come down to a decision of what's best for PD or what's best for families. I can tell you that. I mean, I think the half day for Good Friday, that's easy, right? That seems like everyone wants that. But the PD day on November 3rd and the Wednesday days, I can write you the script. I can fill out the surveys for everyone. So it's either way, it's going to come down to a decision about focusing on PD or focusing on what's best for family. So, I mean, I just preemptively, and that's not a bad thing. So my question is, do you want this to be shared, and we can create a quick survey, a question?
I don't think it needs to be surveyed, but I think it should be shared. And I think things like what Erin said are really interesting with, can we even consider another day of the week other than Wednesday for those half days? I mean, if Friday's not working, right?
Yeah, I understand the Friday and that's the end of the week. Would Monday work? Because that would be the other day that I would be able to say to them legitimately, it's the beginning of the week, I missed one day at the beginning, and then I can give you the 4 days.
Yeah.
I think those types of things that could potentially come in as feedback, you know, are helpful. Or could potentially, right?
I just want to say, I would have a hard time voting on this without having some feedback. So, I mean, I know what we think, but this is some pretty big changes. It's been done a certain way for so long that I would want feedback before I could vote on this for a final.
Do other districts typically, though, their half days for PD are on Wednesdays?
They do it all
It's pretty much all over the place.
It's all over the
There are
place.
surrounding districts that have there are some that every Wednesday is a 90-minute release, or every other Wednesday is a 90-minute release.
Some of them do late start too. So it's not even an
Tried
early
Masco's, tried, day after the Super Bowl was a late start for PD.
Yeah. Deb?
I hesitate to do surveys unless we're going to do what the survey says, a formal survey, feedback. But the thing is, our job is to educate the students. And I think we need to make a decision based on what's going to do that. I'm sorry, I understand that it might be easier for people to take a Friday afternoon off, and they might like that better. But if that's not in the best interest of education, then I don't think that's what we should be doing. I think another day might work better for education, and that's our job.
So to an extent, I agree with that. But one of the things that I definitely hear of happening is if there's a parent that cannot make a half-day work, they take that child out of school. And I think if we're coming down to that situation, then that could be a problem. You know what I mean? If it's a child losing, or a good subset of children losing a full day.
So that would be different on a Friday? I'm saying a half day, yes.
Yep.
I think it should be half day. But what I heard was that Friday, the half day, is not the best use of time as far as
Yes, I would agree. I'm just
professional
saying,
development.
let's say that there's a parent in the situation that Erin stated, right? Mondays are good, Fridays are good, but Wednesdays are not. What I've seen parents do in situations like that before is they pull the child for that full day and they take them to work with them if they have that flexibility, or they're with a relative who doesn't have the ability to, make arrangements for the half day to get them to and from school on that half day or
Right,
something
I'm
like
just saying,
that.
I don't think it should be
So-
Friday. That's what I'm saying.
Tina?
I actually like Aaron's idea of switching it to Monday if we're going to switch it. I do think Fridays, yes, can be a little bit easier, but I think it could be a good compromise between working with families and making it a little bit easier for them and also getting the quality PD that we need and that we want.
I think it's something definitely that maybe the administration could look at, but I'd also be interested how many people fall into Erin's category, because that's one of the things that you always get through feedback, right? Is sometimes you think, yeah, this is a great option, and then you realize that, you
may
it's
find
not
out
universal.
Tuesdays work better.
Exactly.
Who knows? But yeah, but I'm just thinking.
Yeah. Yep. I think it's all valid. All right, so for right now, we have to take a first reading on this because we have to do something tonight. So can I get a motion to approve the school year calendar for 2020-2021 as presented as a first reading? Please.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? All right, thank you. And school choice vote to participate in 2020-2021.
Boilerplate. This is, remember, we can't say no to students leaving. You have to vote yes. And Department of Ed used to require that you vote the number of seats and how many you're going to take, and now they basically just say, you vote to participate. You allow me to make that decision in June after we make all the enrollments if there's space. And I've said to you routinely, we are absolutely limiting our number of choices of students coming in. Basically, class sizes have dictated that and have focused on kindergarten as the place that works best to choice students in. So you're taking a vote to participate in the school choice program, allow students in at my recommendation.
Can I get a motion to approve the Triton Regional School District's participation in the Massachusetts School Choice Program for the 2020-2021 school year with total seats available to be determined by the superintendent based upon resident enrollments confirmed by June?
So moved.
I'll second. Oh, go ahead, Paul.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor? All right, thank you. And subcommittee reports and action items, policy and advocacy. I know, sorry, Linda, you look like you're just done.
We did not meet tonight.
Yes. So poor Linda went through dramatic, I would say, efforts to get here tonight. She has not been well for an extended period of time, so we hope you feel better, but it did cancel P&A tonight, so.
Sorry, Tina and Paul.
Yes. Aaron and Paul. Oh, Tina and Paul who are next to her. Oh, gotcha. Yeah, go ahead.
Linda, real quickly, I'm sure you've already seen this. I know last month or last week even, it might have been that we were talking about MASC hasn't been updating this. Do we have any update on that? Are we updated?
So literally, yeah, we got that electronically, and Linda gave me a hard copy tonight. So we are going to go through the process of, I think there's 30. I still think there's a fight with MASC about, and that's not my organization, but as far as what are we paying for if we're paying $900 a year, that they would at least give us the red line Word document to show us the edits. but we're going to go through, get the name of that online program that compares them side by side.
Draftable.
Draftable. Because we literally need to go through and compare to be able to look at what changed. So we're going to go through that process, and that's not something we're going to focus on during budget season. Thank you. And then, once things slow down, we'll get to that. But it doesn't look like a quick read. It doesn't look like there's a lot of any drastic changes. It's more kind of updating with language and probably things we're already doing.
Yeah, and I did reach out to Kathleen Kelly, who's the policy director. She's also the same one who came to presented the PTA's award earlier this year. So she said that there's a woman named Anne Marie, I think, right?
Martin, yeah.
Yes.
She's the one we've been emailing with.
Yes. So she actually does the logistical work, I guess, behind the scenes as far as preparing all these policies. And she was going to work with Anne Marie to see what the possibilities were of moving forward to be able to get edited versions of the document. So I haven't heard back from her in probably a week now, so I can ping her again and see if I can, hey, have you had a chance to talk? And, if so, what was the outcome? And we'll continue down that road until we hopefully. Yes, exactly.
It's on the radar.
Exactly. Finance, Deb?
I think it's safe to say that most everything we've talked about in finance has been talked about tonight already. But I did just want to emphasize the fact that we had a conversation about OPEB and the stabilization fund, and we all felt very strongly about that as soon as possible, we should at least make a token contribution to OPEB. I guess OPEB first. Our next March 4th.
And PNN, Paul?
So just going to report, like we did last week before the regular school, or the school committee meeting on the 5th, that we're making continued progress with the TRTA, making some good improvements. We're not there yet in terms of a contract, but hope to be relatively soon, and I will defer to Brian as to when our next meeting is. March
4th, March 3rd,
4th,
5th? March 5th. I guess
March
we're
5th,
referring
2
to
o'clock.
Maureen.
And that's it.
What it says in there. All right, there is no correspondence, so can I get a motion to adjourn, please?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll approve.
Please. Any further discussion? All in favor? All right, thank you all, and I will see you on the 26th, I believe.